Okay, so today we're starting the last spread or the last topic of chapter 10. It's a really easy topic, really interesting as well, talking about influences of media on behavior. So last time we were talking about the fact that there are many types of digital media, and sometimes digital media can actually contribute to things like bullying, for example, and cyberbullying. So today we're just looking at 4 specific types of media and how they influence our behavior. And we're going to look at how they influence our behavior in a positive way, as well as how these influence our behavior in a negative way. And so the 4 that you need to know are video games, advertising, social media, and television. And you can remember these 4 using the memory tip VAST, so V-A-S-T, and these are the only 4 that you need to know. We're never going to ask you about something that's not on this. That's not on these list, okay? Or not out of these 4. So just getting straight into it, before we understand and go through each of those specific 4 types of digital media, we have to understand how has digital media been used by Australian people, okay, since the past 10 years or the past 20 years. Now, we have to remember Australians are always pretty tech savvy. We're pretty open to new digital medias. We've always been quite a progressive country. And we're always open to trying new types of digital media. You know, we're always open to, you know, back in the days, we were always open to like DVDs. And then when Blu-ray came out, we were open to Blu-ray. And when all these video games came out, we were open to that as well. Okay, so obviously, Australians use a lot of media. We do a big part of our entertainment and our leisure and our free time, whether it's as individuals or whether it's as a family, is spent in front of digital media or is spent using digital media. Okay, so it's important for us to remember that even though we have different types of digital media, so you've got, you know, video games, you've got advertising, you've got social media, and you've got television, out of all of these different types, TV is actually the most viewed platform. So TV viewing across all age groups, when they did a survey on Australians' digital use, digital media use, they found that TV was the thing that whether you were 10 years old, whether you were 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80, TV was the most consumed form of digital media. And so we could say that because it's the most consumed form of digital media, TV continues to be one of the most influential on our behavior as well. Okay, so that's basically what we're looking at today. And we're looking at the positives and negatives of each of those 4 types of digital media. So let's just get into it. And the first one we're looking at, which is also the most consumed form of digital media, as I just said, is TV. So television as being positive. Sorry, where am I going? Okay, television as being positive. So how is television positive? How does television have the ability or have the potential to possibly benefit us, okay, as individuals or as a community? We have to remember that television does have a lot of influence, and television is something that it's one of those types of digital media that you could just watch at any time of your life. You know, a lot of the time when parents are busy doing something and they can't like be with their child, they put the child in front of the TV. You know, as adults, when we've, you know, come back home from a long day and we want to see the news or we want to catch up on our favorite episode, you know, we watch TV or we turn on the TV. So some people even have the TV running as like simple background noise if they live like alone in apartments or that kind of stuff. So essentially TV is very important. Now, if you're under the age of 2 years, so if you're an infant and your mom or dad puts you in front of the TV just so that, you know, you've got something to look at, you're not getting any major benefit, mainly because you don't understand what's going on the TV. You see it, you're probably entertained by the colors and things, but you don't understand what's actually happening there. A lot of the time, people think that if you turn on the TV and put a kid in front of it, the kid will better develop their sense of verbal language, but that's actually false, okay? So generally, children will learn better if they just watch you, okay? If they just watch their mom and dad and siblings talking in the kitchen or talking in the living room, the children are likely to learn more from those people. So if you're above the age of 2 years old, you can probably benefit more from TV. So for example, when you're watching Sesame Street, if you're like 3 years old, let's say you're watching Sesame Street and Cookie Monster does that thing where he, you know, gobbles down the cookie and he starts to like get very excited about it. Children might actually watch that. And if you've got a 3-year-old brother or sister, they might try to imitate that. okay? When their favorite character comes up, like Big Bird, they start clapping their hands because they're excited to see that character. So essentially these kinds of TV and these kinds of shows help young children to really develop a sense of attachment to another character, okay, whether it be a cartoon character. They understand the dynamics between these characters, okay? They understand that sometimes I forgot his name, the one that lives in a garbage can. Sometimes he just wants to be left alone, and sometimes the other characters can respect that. They start to understand these little social intricacies and nuances that maybe they wouldn't understand by just observing their parents. Okay, a lot of the time, educational shows like Play School, Sesame Street, you know, those kids shows that always have some lesson at the end and they go on some big adventure and all that stuff. Those things are really good for children because they do promote the intellectual kind of development and general knowledge development of kids. Okay, in adolescence and adulthood, we don't watch Play School and everything anymore, but we still watch TV shows that have lessons embedded in them. Whether you watch the most, whether you watch the most kind of horror kind of TV show, whether you watch a drama, you've always got like, lessons that you can learn from that. Like, okay, it's important not to betray those that you love. It's important not to, it's important to stay true to your values, all that kind of stuff. So we can learn those from TV shows. And TV shows not only give us those lessons, but obviously, like we said before, they give us entertainment as well. So those are some positives of TV, and just know at least maybe 2 positives of TV. Okay, 2 positives should be more than enough. So 2 benefits of watching TV for our social behavior. So how is TV then negative? Now we know that not all shows on TV are actually positive. Okay, some shows can be quite violent, some shows can have adult themes, some shows can show aggression, okay, or can show graphic violence. So a lot of the time when TV shows show violence or show aggression or show risk-taking behavior, they glamorize it. And what do we mean by glamorize? Well, they make it look appealing. So if you've got a character who's really kind of like edgy and who's perceived by everyone else as being cool and powerful, often in shows they might start to smoke a cigar, or they might start to drink a very expensive brand of alcohol, okay, or they might put people down to make themselves look more powerful. So all of those negative behaviors that we see from certain TV characters, TV show characters, can actually show us that it is okay to put other people down. You know, if you're, smoking is a sign of being edgy and cool. So obviously, it's important to, and trivialized, okay? If you ever watch these kinds of like, shows that are like very violent or involve a lot of crime or a lot of, graphic violence, you start to become desensitized to blood and start to become desensitized to the image of someone being shot. Okay, even though you know it's a TV show, it can actually kind of desensitize you to those things over time if you watch it a lot, okay, especially if you're a young child watching it and you can't know the difference. So research has shown that prolonged exposure to violence from TV, and this is something you learn about in psychology next year when you do something called observational learning, how children learn from observing the environment around them, whether that's a real life environment or whether that's an environment they see on TV. So number one, TV is negative because it can lead children to start to enjoy violence. We often see this with video games as well. So this is a top point we're going to bring up with video games as well. They can lead children to display aggression or violence in both the short and long term. They can lead to immediate distress and worry for children. So if you watch a really violent scene and you get distressed by that, or you get upset by watching that, that's also obviously affecting your well-being there. And TV can be negative because sometimes TV shows can reinforce or add support to the idea that the world is a scary place and that sometimes violence is the only answer. Okay, especially if you're watching a TV show where a character is trying not to be violent, but the other characters or the villains in that particular show give them no choice. Okay, so sometimes that's how certain shows go, and that's what certain shows plot lines can be. All right, so just note again any 2 negatives related to watching TV. All right, the next thing that we're looking at is video games. Now, video games are positive because number one, some video games are multiplayer. So if you're doing a multiplayer video game, you can actually interact with other people. Some people actually develop online friendships because of video games or multiplayer games. Okay, certain video games are educational or problem solving based, and they can actually increase your thinking skills. Okay, so for example, when Nintendo DS first came out, like they had this game called Brain Training. Okay, and it was like a series of like little problem solving things. Cooking Mama is also an example of a game that, you know, does involve you kind of making quick decisions, kind of planning the recipes, all that kind of stuff. Also games like Wii, or Just Dance, or any of those kinds of games are really good for like improving coordination and motor skills. And some people even use Wii as like a low-level form of physical activity, which is always a good thing as well. So that's essentially the 3 benefits of video games. So just know at least any 2. So what are the negatives of video games? And I'm sure you can already guess what some of the negatives are. Number 1, if you've got single player games where, you know, like you're the active player, sometimes this can be a problem, especially if the game is like a violent game. So if you're like those active shooter games where you're like shooting others and that kind of stuff, that can actually make you feel kind of like, you know, very powerful. Even though it's a video game, there have been like cases, like very extreme cases that of children playing these video games and, you know, in America, and, you know, looking for their father's gun and, you know, trying to like shoot other people. So it is an extreme, those are extreme cases, but we can't say that the influence isn't there. Okay, and video games can have that negative influence. Generally, exposure to video games is a causal risk factor for aggressive behavior. It doesn't mean that they equal to aggressive behavior, but they do increase that risk, okay? As well as increased aggressive thoughts, emotions, decreased empathy, so you find it hard to understand other people, and decreased pro-social behavior. So those are some examples of the disadvantages or negatives of video games. Also, we have to remember that even though we can all put all the blame on video games, or video games are the reason that every kid in this world is violent and you know, not able to be controlled, we can't blame video games only. We have to remember that video games are one factor, but maybe the violence that the children observe at home if they come from an abusive household, the actual mental health of the child, how that child is treated at school. Okay, if a child is bullied, we've seen from all the school shootings in America that all school shooters were people that didn't necessarily play video games, but were people who were bullied or outcasted or treated as, you know, less than what they should have been. So it's important to remember that video games don't always equal to, you know, a kid shooting another kid or kid shooting someone, but we have to remember that that is one possible risk factor that can come out of that. Okay, so again, just know any 2 negatives of video games. Then we've got social media. So social media is this huge thing that has popped up mostly within the past like 10 to 15 years, not more than that. Okay, TV has been around a lot longer than that. Video games have probably been around a bit longer than that. But social media is one of those newer forms of digital media. And even though it's new, the kind of impact that it has had on our social behavior is extremely, you know, it's extremely profound in the sense that, you know, it has led to many good things, like you know, you're able to connect with someone who you were a classmate with in kindergarten or in grade prep, but it's also bad because it's opened up more avenues for things like social bullying and cyberbullying. Okay, so these are just 2 graphs from the book showing you the frequency of internet use and the frequency of using social networking sites. So you can see that about 25% of Australians, and this is probably old data, not current, but 25% of Australians report using it every day. Now, if this was to be specific for adolescents or teenagers, we would see a much bigger percentage. I think this is just for general adults in Australia. Okay, so that's just some data there. You don't need to memorize that, but just for your own understanding. So what is the positive influence of social media? Well, number 1, obviously, social media promotes social networking. It promotes communication. Let's say you don't have the number of a friend that you went to school with, but because you've got them on Facebook or you've got them on Instagram, you can private message them through there and ask them, oh, what's your number? You know, I lost it. Or, you know, you can ask them for some help. So it allows people to connect with each other in a better way. Now, for people who are shy or introverted, social media is also it's a big relief for them, because sometimes shy and introverted people don't want to actually call up somebody and like speak to them, but they prefer to kind of speak to them behind maybe a screen where they don't actually have to speak or they don't actually have to meet that person face to face. Promote digital literacy. So obviously, those of you who use social media, and there's no research for this, but I can just assume that those of you who use social media are a lot more savvy with your technology. You're a lot more capable in terms of what you can do with technology. Okay, you've got better digital literacy there. And obviously, we learn a lot from social media, and this can both be a good thing, but this can also be a bad thing. Sometimes certain pages on social media can actually, can actually propagate incorrect information or exaggerated information. It's not always accurate. But again, we do learn some of the, at least I think with the majority of you, the first kind of news that you see, the first instance of a news article or news event that you see is often through social media, okay, whether it's Facebook, Instagram, I don't know, maybe TikTok, maybe, I'm not sure. So all of those things they do allow you to communicate some important news event or some important social issue to a very large audience of people, okay? And we're not all stuck on news websites all day. We don't have the TV on Channel 7 News all day, but these are ways in which those news events can actually be sent out or mass transmitted to a large amount of people, where a large amount of people are likely to see it. So that's basically some positives about social media. So again, just note any two from this particular slide. And like I said at the beginning, this is really common sense. It's not something that's really rocket science that we're doing here. It's something we can relate back to our real life. Some negative influences of social media. So like I said before, social media can contribute to cyberbullying. It can contribute to issues in terms of identity theft. So, there have been instances where people's profile photos are stolen and people use them to make other profiles under different names and things like that. So it actually happened to one of my friends, and it's actually kind of scary, thinking about that those kinds of things can actually happen. Okay, a loss of privacy. You are technically selling your information, okay? And Facebook got into a lot of controversy about this with the whole privacy issues. Undesirable social media profile. So let's say if someone has made a social media profile and maybe, it's not to the level or standard that other people are doing it in their school or in their workplace. So they might actually be put down for that, okay? We have to remember that even though social media allows us to connect with other people, are those connections actually meaningful? Do they mean anything, or do they just go as far as a, hey, how are you? Or simply, just seeing their posts every now and then? Are we actually engaging and interacting with them on a meaningful level? Also, one of the biggest problems with social media is we compare the lives of people on social media, and we compare that to our own lives. And we're like, oh, look there, look how nice their room is compared to mine, or look at their new iPad that they've bought, why can't I have something like that? Or, we just compare things like that. And we have to remember that social media presence is a very different type of presence from who you are in real life. Okay, people always project the best versions of themselves onto social media. So obviously comparing yourself to social media figures, or to people who live on social media technically, is not a good indication of, it's not a good thing for your mental health. Also, social media may reduce your actual face-to-face contact with people. So you might just sit and just think, you know what, I always talk to them on Instagram, I always talk to them on this particular website, so why should I see them in real life? It might also intrude into the time that you spend with your own family at home. And obviously, one of the biggest things for probably school kids is that social media can be a potential distractor and a time waster at critical times. And so, a lot of students, a lot of VCE students, and I was probably one of them a long time ago, we put there's these apps that can actually block you from visiting social media for 1 or 2 hours at a time. And so if you really feel like it's distracting you, there are avenues and apps that have been developed to actually meet that market, to actually stop people from using it or from visiting it, so they can actually work more productively on their tasks. So again, just note any two negative influences of social media. And the last thing we're looking at for today is positive and negative influence of advertising. So advertising is really straightforward, just any ads that you see on TV, any ads that you see on billboards when you're driving down a freeway, any ads that you might see at a bus stop. All of these are just examples of advertising. Now, advertising is positive because obviously without advertising, how are we going to get our product onto the market? How are people going to actually gain information about goods and services? A lot of the time, the newest phones, the newest technology, the newest food products, these are all advertised to us. We don't actively seek out or research about them. We just see an ad about it, whether it's an ad on YouTube, whether it's an ad on TV, whether it's an ad on, a billboard that we see. That's the main way we actually learn about goods and services that are available to us. And public service announcements. So whenever we're talking about, public service announcements like road safety announcement, this road has been closed, or, this street is not going to have power for the rest of the day. Usually these are advertised either on radio or through mobile phone messages and that kind of stuff. Now, what are some negatives of advertising? Sometimes goods and services are not advertised accurately, or they're advertised in a very exaggerated way. So if you've ever gone to Macca's and looked at the menu and you look at how nice the burgers look, and then when you open the burger that you've got, it looks like someone ran over it with a truck. That's probably because of misinformation. So like social media, companies always advertise their product to look like it just came down from heaven or something, like to make it look so beautiful, but it's not always the case, okay? It's not always accurate. Again, advertising is a very good way for unhealthy products like processed foods, junk foods to actually be advertised. Now, alcohol is still advertised, but tobacco or cigarettes are no longer advertised on TV. They used to be back in the days, but obviously with changes in health policy, that stopped. Okay, obviously we still have junk food being advertised, but it is to a lesser extent. Okay, but this can still draw children in with advertising of junk food. And again, a lot of advertisements are like, they're not accurate in the sense that they can be photoshopped or airbrushed. So if you've got like a celebrity advertising like a new brand of, I don't know, concealer or foundation or lipstick, it might look really good on them because they might not even be wearing the exact shade of the lipstick they're advertising. So a lot of the time we have to remember that advertisements always look idealized, which means they look better. They look like the ideal situation. But when you get that product in your own hands and you use it, it might not look exactly the same. Okay, and this goes for almost anything that almost any product that we might talk about, any product that can be advertised. All right, and that is the end of the chapter 10. So we're done with chapter 10 now, so that's good. So I'm just going to stop the recording here.